So I'm going to come back and then let's have fun and let's learn today. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Motolani. So good to see you. Very energetic as usual. Your vibration and your energy is always very infectious. I don't know where you've been, but you have been missing in action, like I always say to you. Looks like you have abandoned me in America. Tolani is my guy in Nigeria, and she, I mean, literally, people usually beg me not to send Tolani to them whenever they want to invite me somewhere, because all she sees is business. Anyway, House of Saviors, how are you doing today? It's another Sunday, and you know how we do it. America, happy Thanksgiving. We're still in the mood of Thanksgiving, and I'm sure you guys enjoy your turkey. I cooked black soup. I mean, that's one soup I've never made myself before. I've made all kinds of soup. I've never made black soup. So yes, I mean, this week I decided to, you know, eat that frog, and it came out very well. I mean, you guys missed. I wish I could share with all of you, but I mean, we're on virtual meeting. Maybe someday when we do physical meeting, I'll be able to share my black soup with you. It has a lot of protein. You can eat it with a bowl, whatever it is. Anyway, okay, today we have someone in the house. It's a big masquerade. If you know me very well, you know that I don't joke with words. So I have a name I call him. I call him Bami. You know, so when I call somebody Bami, you know what that means. If you understand Yoruba, you know that it's not just, it's not because I want to excite him. I mean it because it's one of the few people that, you know, can call me to order anytime, any day. I don't have to agree with him, but he will put it the way he wants to put it, and I can't run away, right? He can flog me anytime. Well, so let me just read his profile. We call him PT. PT Tunji Idowu is an accomplished, transformational, and innovative leader with over 3.5 decades of global, multi-sectoral, and cross-functional experience in not-for-profit management and social investment, corporate affairs, public relations, human resources, and organization capability, diversity, equity, and inclusion, change management, and leadership development. His core expertise lies in building stellar leadership teams, ensuring process optimization, developing inclusive culture, and enhancing organizational effectiveness. As the executive director, he oversees all organizational activities at PIND. I'll tell you what I meant shortly, including liaising with the board of trustees and partners. Proud to this role, he was the deputy executive director overseeing all programs and business development efforts, a pioneer in diversity, equity, and inclusion practice in corporate Nigeria. He helped to enhance Chevron Corporation's DEI efforts at the global level by driving key initiatives beyond the US. His stints at Chevron, where he worked before PIN, also include multiple roles where he was actually actively involved in addressing some of the Niger Delta region's most difficult challenges through Chevron's highly regarded Global Memorandum of Understanding, community engagement process, and working with various stakeholders and reforming systems that help in reducing poverty and conflict. Tunji is passionate about developing successive generations, and through his work, ministry, and personal network, is heavily invested in mentoring and capacity building. An MBA honors alumni at the St. Mary's College, Moraga, California. He also has a postgraduate diploma in mass communication and a Bachelor of Arts degree in English, both from the University of Lagos, Nigeria. He is certified senior professional in human resource management, a certified mediator, certified facilitator, and a leadership coach. Above all, is BAMI. Okay, PIND is actually Partnership Initiative in the Niger Delta, a Chevron established NGO. PT, good to have you in the house, sir. Good morning, sir. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, PT. How are you, sir?
Hi, Praise. Thank you so much. Very generous introduction, and I don't take it for granted. Glad to be able to join you and everyone here. I've heard so much about all the good work that's going on here, and just looking at the vision and the creed and all of that, I am jazzed up. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you very much, PT. So good to have you here. This is House of Saviors, And basically, we're raising saviors for our world. And in the last 8 weeks thereabout, we've been talking about leadership, dispensable leadership, in the sense that African leaders don't like to leave the position. They don't like to even leave at all. And what we have been saying is you need to grow your leadership to a level that it can throw up other leaders who can maintain the system in a way that nobody needs you anymore. And you are sitting there as elder statesman, looking at what you've done, and you are grateful for what you've done. As again, sitting down till, like your bad people will say, that it's only death that can remove the clothes from the masquerade. We're just dead till forever. Now, my first question for you, PT, because you're one of the people I respect, and I mean that with every sense of, my being, because I admire how you have managed leadership. You belong to the older generation, but you are able to relate across all levels, and you never judge. You just throw the questions, and it takes my mind to another region I've never observed before. Now, why has African leadership struggled to produce development unlike their counterparts, in the West or in other parts of the world? What is the problem, sir?
Thank you, Praise. But before I jump in, I couldn't help seeing some of the comments here and to say thank you for the warm welcome. To say thank you. It's good to connect with you again. And I see my Chancellor of the Exchequer, Adams. We call him Babalo. It's good to know that he's also in the house. Thank you so much. Praise, the question you've asked is one that we probably need a whole seminar to address, but I'll do my best. I can't pretend that I have all the answers, but I'll give you my own views. I know people have said that, but I think it's John Maxwell that talks about the law of the lead, and that you can't rise above the lead. And so a leader cannot rise above the limit of thinking. And also a population, a nation, a race, a continent will struggle to also rise above the level of their leaders. And the leaders themselves are products of the system, of the environment. So they themselves can hardly rise above the systems that have produced them. And so you find that that's part of the challenge that we are having. There are many people, when they talk about the underdevelopment of Africa, who fall into one of several, maybe about 3 or 4 schools of thought. There are those who will blame the impact of slavery and colonialism. And let's not minimize it, that has its impact, but it doesn't tell the whole story. There are those who will blame us and say, listen, it's our own problem. After all, other nations that were colonized have moved on, they're doing better, and they'll point at the likes of UAE, they'll point at Singapore, and they'll say, well, it's all about you guys, you haven't done much. There's some truth in that, but it doesn't tell the whole story either. There are those who will say it's a combination of the two. And maybe I fall into that school of thought. I think colonialism dealt us a serious blow, no doubt. Those guys knew what Africa had, a lot of wealth, and they targeted us. And people think it's like a switch. You can't flip a switch and say colonialism ended 62 years ago, and therefore everything should be hunky-dory and back to. No, it has its impact on us, and there's still neo-colonialism where we've not even risen. Don't forget, even our leaders are products of colonial educational systems. They're leaders of colonial operational systems. The whole software in them comes out of that whole environment. And until those leaders can think differently and really have the critical numbers and the critical mass to really revamp things and change some of the systems, it'll be very difficult to be able to beat the same system. You and I talk about this, and I don't know who it's original to, but we have a quote among us that a bad system will beat a good leader anytime, hands down. Because that leader is outnumbered, and you have systemic arrangements in place that the leader will need to build a critical mass of allies to revamp the system for him or her to then be successful. Otherwise, they're stuck. Slavery also has its impact on us, no doubt. And Western exploitation continues under the guise of neocolonialism and the fact that Africa is often been playing catch. I mean, if Africa gets it right today, doesn't mean the rest of the world is going to be at a standstill. They're still going to be ahead. But what many of us are looking for is to say, let Africa at least get some basics right in terms of development. And part of what you may not want to look at is that what colonialism built on was that it also exacerbated some of our traditional fault lines. We are extremely diverse in Africa within individual nations of their own before their maps were contrived and made into artificial countries. Then when you now look at colonial alliances and allegiances, you still find out that some of us are still fighting those who belong to other camps. Anglophone will not flow with Francophone because
Okay, looks like PT's network. Look at PT's network is a bit challenged, but I'm enjoying that conversation. It's quite deep. It's taking it from a realm that it's very, very deep. It's hitting into the real issue that we're dealing with. So we'll wait for PT to get back. Yeah, but are you guys getting something? Are you getting value already? If you're getting value, you can go to the chat box and let me know what you have picked so far, right? What has stood out for you from what PT has said so far? Okay, people are saying they're getting value. It's like he's doing a surgery, right? And the surgery is on and power was taken in Nigeria. That's what it feels like for me, right? Because I mean, the flow I'm getting, it's the deep issues that we hate to talk about, but we have to talk about it. So we will, admin, please help me track when PT is back and help me put him back on. Okay, PT is back. PT, you need to unmute, sir.
All right, I can unmute now. I was trying, but I wasn't unmuted. Sorry about that. I got thrown off one network. That's part of our underdevelopment in Africa. Hopefully this will be more steady than the previous one, but if need be, I'll be on a couple of devices. I'm not sure where you lost me. I'm not sure what was the last thing you had me say. But
yeah, you were talking about the Anglophone and the Francophone not even relating with themselves.
All right, so I was trying to build on some of the headwinds that we face, that despite the traditional fault lines that we had ourselves on the basis of religion, on the basis of our various ethnicities and tribes in Africa, the colonial allegiances and the alliances that followed those are further built on those and exacerbated the situation. You have a situation where we have more allegiance to our colonial ties than we have to our own historical and traditional ties. People are suspicious of those who are in the Anglophone family, rather than seeing them as fellow brothers and recognizing the fact that some of the maps were artificially contrived out of Europe. And so that extreme diversity also is part of what has gotten in our way in Africa, where we have not seen it as an opportunity for us to build on strength, but rather as something that threatens us. And so we continue to push against each other. And when we get distracted by those kind of things, we really don't spend enough time to look at key things like developmental issues. Yesterday, somebody shared a video that reminded me of an illustration that I was familiar with, but I love the way it was then illustrated yesterday. And it's about putting black ants and red ants in a jar. And they're getting along with each other, no issues, until somebody shakes the jar. And all that agitation forces the two sets of ants to begin to fight and take each other out. Part of why Africa has not developed is that somebody is often shaking the jar. And I have been in the oil and gas sector. A lot of people talk about bunkering, oil theft, and they focus at the lowest end of the issue, the community dwellers who are having illegal refineries. But they often take off their eyes from those who take them out in trawlers and the markets in which they're taken into. Just as you have blood diamonds, you have blood oil. There are markets in the Western world that steal and receive stolen oil from Nigeria and other parts of the world. people don't realize that it's these guys that are the ones operating at the biggest level, while they give the crumbs to the guys at the lowest level, who then use those to cause the inter-ethnic fights in the Niger Delta, while those guys are smiling to the banks. The guys who are shaking the jar are often the ones. But as you often hear, if you don't have internal issues, the external forces cannot take advantage of you. It's because we take our eyes off the big picture that we often don't realize it enough to build our own alliances, and we allow those external forces to get at us. Every time there's a problem, like right now, Ukraine and Russia are at war, people are looking for alternative sources of energy. And so oil theft is increasing here and so on. But if we're not connecting the dots, if our leaders are products of the same colonial educational and thinking systems, and they cannot keep in touch with alternative ways like the Chinese have done, like the Arabs have done, then we're going to just continue in an endless cycle. Sorry for that long-winded response, but as I said, that question is one that you need a whole week seminar to be able to address. But those are just my two cover one.
Now, it's not a long, I love the flow and the way you have taken it. It's almost as if you are dissecting, you are doing a surgery. And so you are very, very intentional. I think I love that. Now, you have raised a whole lot of issues that it looks very scary now with what you have said. I've done a study, at least the family life system across all the African countries. I did that study 3 years ago. And I'm often shocked when I look at the cultural diversities and the various groups brought together to become a country. I'm looking at Benin Republic, for example. It's a very small country, but over 45 ethnic groups that are not even related. There is a Yoruba, so they will perpetually battle with identity crisis, almost for the rest of their life, except somebody stands up. The question that is easily coming to my mind is, with all of this that you have said, is there hope? And how do we begin to build systems? Because if you take someone, they've often said that a millipede in Nigeria can never become a lion in America. Now, with what I've seen so far, it looks like that is not correct, because Nigeria may be what has made him a millipede, and the system here can bring out the lion nature in him. I keep asking, how can we build systems in Africa that can trap our talent, that can sustain their success and make it replicable? Or are we just going to live like this for the rest of our lives, without being able to do something? How do we build a system that supports the best interest of everyone? PT.
Thank you. Diversity on its own is not a problem. It's neither good nor bad, just on its own. It's probably what we do with it. So when I hear you talk, Benin Republic has 45, Nigeria has over 300, depending on how high it's counted, how you count it. But on its own, it's not a problem. The issue is, first of all, refusing to be threatened by differences. Too many people are threatened by differences. And there is no need for us to be threatened by, it's easy for us to come into our comfort zones. But if you are not exposed, if you don't open, if you have not experienced maybe superior decision quality or superior stuff coming from other sides, you probably will keep thinking, my way is the highway, my way is the best way. But it's by that interaction, that openness, that we begin to understand. And so as African societies and African nations, and you have to give us credit, a lot of our nations do have provisions in them to want to tap into that diversity. Nigeria recognized that. And that's part of why you have some form of affirmative action in a nation whereby you must have ministers from every state. Now, that's just state. It doesn't mean that every ethnic group is represented, but they've got to find some political, administrative arrangement to do that. And within each one, people have their arrangements also for rotation. You may be one of those who believe in meritocracy and say, hey, it's just merit, it doesn't matter. But for the person who's always coming second and third, and who sees somebody always coming first, he's never going to believe the field is level if you don't give him a chance to also have a shot at demonstrating what he or she can do. And so that's part of what people then understand. That's what drives people to say, let's have some form of rotational arrangement. Let's have some form of thing. What we need to start with is really coming to terms with the fact that we are different, and then understand those differences. discuss the issues that are common to us, and allow us to operate some things separately too. And I'm not saying this only for politics. I'm also saying this dovetails right down even into individual homes. How do you run the home? How do you allow each person to express themselves? My wife and I way back understood the fact that when we bring our commonwealth together and we've tackled the common issues, the rest of it, hey, have your budget allocation for yourself. You're not accountable to me on how you spend that. I have mine. I'm not accountable to you. But we take care of the common one, and then everybody does that. If everybody looks at things that way, and we discuss, we negotiate, we agree, we execute things, and we see the results and come back and learn lessons and progress, then we can begin to see the opportunities there, and we are not threatened, and things are not lopsided. And if you have imbalances, you have to have means with which you want to address them and bring things back to the norm. It's a lack of inclusion. And inclusion talks about embracing all components and tapping into their strength. It's that lack of inclusion that makes all of us to be threatened and creates the dysfunction that we have. Because the notion that we've often had, and it's beginning to change, but maybe we're a bit late to the party, but it's better than nothing at all. After all, some of my people in Yoruba land will say it's when you wake up that your day starts. So even when you're starting late, you're a late bloomer, and that happens to different people in life. You've woken up, you can play catch up to an extent, or even if you can't catch up, you can reduce the gap. We're beginning to understand certain nuances. But I think the main opportunity is we've got to come to terms with our unique context and grow our own models from home. Too often we've been pushed to try and operate systems that are a little bit alien to us. We can look at the principles, because there are some universal principles. You can look at some principles, but you've got to fashion out what makes sense for you, not just to have started off with the British system, then you switch overnight without managing change and the transition to an American system without understanding all the waste and all the excesses that are in there, which is what has happened to Nigeria. And people have to understand that you need to look at some other models. The Chinese have their own model. You can be a Western and say it's repressive. But when you look at the indices of global development, they are not far behind. The Singaporeans have blended a few things. UAE has brought some of its own along. Israel has some of its own. People have got to look at what works for them in their context, look at effective practices globally. You might then have a potpourri, a mishmash of things at the end of the day, but you've got to start by talking. If you don't talk and take advantage of your diversity and foster a sense of inclusion for all parties, then we are going to have problems. That's the way that we're going to be able to have an enabling environment that will help us to remove barriers in our way, and then that will allow us to contribute effectively. If we don't contribute meaningfully and effectively, we won't be able to improve our systems. But when we do that, we can lay the foundations of new systems, and then we can build on those systems to help us move forward.
Wow. Pete, thank you very much. You talked about looking at our own, leveraging on our originality to build our own system. I think Nigeria has attempted to do that a few times, constitutional conference, where you say, okay, everybody come to the table, let us talk. Implementation has been a problem. And sometimes the people representing the people, the other people who are followers don't really trust their leaders, right? And so if I look at what is happening in Nigeria right now, that we say, okay, it's the time of the West, then somebody says Emeloko, and the person says, okay, is the time of the Yorubas or it's time of the Igbos. And if it's Yorubas, then I am the elder here. I am the one that should take the lead, even if, everything shows that I might not be in the best, state of health or wellness or something like that. That seems to be what our culture says. And that is kind of repressive because it doesn't then promote, competence and whatever. But even in the midst of that, trust is a key factor. What is the place of trust in creating this system? Because if the led don't trust, and you can see the next election in Nigeria seems to be an issue between the younger generation and the older generation to say, you've lived a life of your own, you've lived the life of your children, you've lived the life of your grandchildren, you still want to live the life of your great-grandchildren. That when is the young man and the young generation going to take over and things like that? What is the place of trust, and what role should trust play in all these things that you're talking about, Peter?
Let me start. Thanks. That's a deep question. And often some people find topics like trust soft, but it's a powerful one. So thanks for that. Let me start at the personal level, or maybe at the team or organizational level. When I look at here, and I know I peeped in once during one of your sessions, but I didn't stay long. But when I looked at what I saw here today, it's evident that there is an element of engagement and buy-in for people to key into a creed and things of that nature, and some very lofty statements that were declarations that were made earlier on. It tells me something. There is engagement and there is buy-in, and buy-in only happens when there is trust. I remember, and the leader I want to cite may not be the best example, but it shows you how trust works, regardless of where you are on the moral divide. If people are a bunch of armed robbers and they trust their leader, they will achieve great things if they trust themselves. And you might say, how can there be trust among armed robbers? Strange things happen. But I remember that Nigeria's military president, General Babangida, at a time was applauded by two of his lieutenants. People might not remember late Lawan Gwadabe and Abubakar Umar. I'm not sure which of the two of them, or whether it was both of them. In an interview, they said they could follow their general into battle blindfolded. That statement has stuck with me. I mean, how many people were going to follow anybody, even with two eyes open, than to say you follow somebody blindfolded? And what made them do that? Trust, until, of course, he betrayed the trust. And that's when they went against it. And that tells me something, because if you look in the scriptures, especially the Bible, you also find that there was a time when some disciples of the Lord Jesus Christ backed off. They dropped off and stopped following him when he provoked them with what they thought were some really off statements. And I think he was deliberately trying to test people. And then he turned back and looked at the remaining ones and said, you guys haven't gone yet, you haven't left. I said, where would we go? We've left everything for you because we buy into your message. And this is PT's paraphrased version, because we buy into you and we believe in your message. For me, trust is the glue that holds things together, especially between leaders and their followers. If people sense the leader's empathy, if they sense authenticity in their leaders, if they find their leaders are credible, and the leaders conduct affairs in a way that is inclusive of all elements, all followers, then you will find that they can build and win the trust of their people, build and sustain trust. And if people and groups have common values, shared values among them, especially between the leaders and their followers, then it becomes possible for them to buy into the decisions that are made. Now, you cited the Nigerian example. The truth is, while Nigeria has done well at enshrining provisions for ministerial, it's kind of shied away from really having constitutional provisions for how the office of the president would be occupied. It's made it openly, and so it made it openly competitive and left it to the parties. And indeed, it was only one party in the past that really kind of put that arrangement in place, because that was the party that held sway for a long time. Now, the one that took over from it has tried to replicate the same thing. But you found that the schism we've experienced is because people really didn't have that discussion and have a common understanding. So there's a jostling. And if it's a dog-eat-dog situation, if you have the upper hand, then you are the one that gains the advantage. And so people play all kinds of funny things. And even the former party that was supposed to have done something was saying, now interpreting things narrowly within its own party. And people will say it's correct to an extent, while some other people will say, hey, it was not sensitive to the larger polity. That's part of the situation. And that's what I was saying in response to the last question. We've got to talk. We've got to sit down at small levels, family units, communal levels. And communities were doing well until the Western form of administration came in and somewhat truncated that and has relegated those communal settings. We know that in our traditional societies, most kingship institutions are rotational. A few are hereditary, but a lot are rotational among ruling families. That's a sense of fostering inclusion and ensuring equity across board. And it's going to make sense in each situation. What you will have is when my way is different from yours, and if we don't get to fully understand how the differences are discussed, and we think it's only through might, then we're going to have issues. You might win this time around, but when I get a chance, what's going to happen? I'm going to try and replicate what you did to me, rather than understanding that we are approaching things different, that we need to have a common ground. And that's where it's communication that's going to help us to build the trust. Because it's when you communicate that you begin to understand the other side, and you then are able to observe empathy, and you're able to observe that if there's authenticity in their dealings. And then if they have a track record of fulfilling their promises, you'll be able to find them credible. But until we do that, in many places, we're going to fall short. I'm glad to see that places like Kenya, they are getting over some of the traditional issues, and other places are beginning to become more steady. But that's the way to go, in my view.
Wow. Thank you very much, PT. House of Saviors, please show PT some love and the chat box. What are you learning? How do you feel about this session? And if you have any questions, send it personally to me. And that takes me to the next question, PT. Thank you.
I hope I'm making sense. I'm not sounding too ideological.
No, at all, PT. I'm taking notes here, and there are a few adjustments I'm even making already. Now, strong leadership, demands the courage to take tough decisions, right? Very, very tough decisions. But the people don't like tough decisions. For example, I always say that I don't envy the next person that will take over from President Muhammad Buhari in Nigeria, because it looks like the person is set up to fail. The person is set up to that person is set up for what the person didn't bargain for. I don't even know how somebody can be excited to okay, so let me add this one. Okay, good. I don't know how somebody can be excited to take over from the presidency that we have right now, based on the crisis that has been created. But a lot of the masses are not aware. Now, strong leadership will demand tough decisions. The question is, how can leaders balance tough decisions and empathy without rocking the boat? Because there is no easy way out of anything. I've seen you have been tough, but at the same time, you have been empathetic, that it's almost as if, the decision you have taken is tough, but at the same time, people can easily follow and flow. Maybe because your communication is very, very strong. How can a leader take tough decisions and be strong, be dogged, without necessarily rocking the boat? For people here who are running organizations, and maybe for even people who are leading nations.
Thank you, Praise. Another very deep and good question. Let me say right off the bat, you can't be a successful leader and not rock some boats. I think President Obasanjo and I think President George W. Bush both said it in different ways. It's the leadership and running a country is not a popularity contest. If you are concerned about being number one most liked on the like list, you're not going to do much. The only way you won't offend people is if you don't do anything at all. Even then, some people are going to yap you, they're going to criticize you for not doing anything. So you are going to rock some boats. The issue though is, what boats are you rocking? What's the mission? What direction are you trying to take your co-sojourners? I talked earlier on about the need to cast a vision. I find out that most people are not worried about change. What most people are concerned about is being prepared for the transition from the current state to the desired state. If you can cast the vision for me, if you can communicate for me, if you can show me what's the need for me, and it doesn't have to be monetary, it doesn't have to be financial. It might just be that you appeal to my emotions, you appeal to my ideal my sense of ideals, my sense of values. But if you can carry me from where we both are to where we need to be and carry me along, most people will follow. I can deal with any change if I have enough time to manage the transition. If it hits me suddenly, it can set me spiraling for like a couple of days while I'm brooding over issues, but it usually doesn't take me more than 2-3 days to get adjusted to the new norm of whatever it is that comes my way, because I don't always anticipate everything. Sometimes life hits you on the blind side. But a leader, and I like that, yes, the leader has to have a thick skin. Thanks, Murola, for that comment. You've got to know, but you've got to be, you don't have to be pig-headed. You don't have to think you know it all. And you don't have to surround yourself with only those who think like you and who are going to just be rubber stamps, yes men, yes women around you. You've got to have a diverse set of people. And it's always good to have somebody on your side who thinks differently from the rest. Again, our side, I think it was President George W. Bush, the first presidential debate he had, he didn't do too well. His opponent whooped him. And I think he confessed that when he was asking his lieutenants, almost everybody was saying, oh, you did great, Mr. President, you did great. But he inside him, he knew he bombed until one young staffer turned to him and said, sorry, Mr. President, you bombed. And he said, yes, I bombed, but I'm going to be ready for the next one. And by the next one, he was able to turn the tide, and that got him elected. Or was he re-elected? I'm not sure if it was the first or the second election. I can't remember too well now. But you've got to have somebody who will tell you the truth. Unfortunately, if one is an insecure leader and you don't want to rock the boat, you're never going to be able to do something. But I have found out in all the things I want to do that I gather enough information around the issue. You triangulate your information, not from one source. You gather from as many sources as possible, because the more sources you have, the better the decision quality you're going to have. None of us is as wise as all of us, but you also don't want to spend all your time gathering information and get into analysis paralysis. When you've been analyzed enough, you've got to decide. You've got to be decisive. But when you are able to get enough information and from as diverse as possible an audience, then you'll be able to decide and have a better decision quality than if you just went by your own gut or your own outlook. And then you have to communicate. You talked about communication earlier on. You've got to carry people along. You've got to sell to them what you're trying to say. You've got to give them a chance to have their say. You've got to be able to listen to other perspectives from those even who are your critics, who are then maybe that's going to help you be aware of some blind spot or consider something that you had overlooked or ignored in the whole process. That's why serious people always look for peer review, peer input in whatever they do. That's why professors will submit their findings to their peers for things. That's why engineers and other professionals will submit things before they go public, because you want to be sure that you've tested things. Nobody launches something on a big scale, except unrealistic Africans in some instances, especially Nigerians. Everybody that has built something great starts small and pilots it. Then you learn lessons from the pilot before you then scale up. And so for a leader to be able to get the desired change, you've got to get the right information, ensure there is buy-in, include as many people as possible. And if you're fortunate that you've built trust and you have people who have their buy-in, that means everybody will put in their shift. Everybody will do their own part. You know, you won't be the leader that before you set sail, everybody's saying, yeah, but once you set sail, you look back and find that you're all by yourself. Other people are bolted in other directions. Once everybody is doing their part and you are monitoring to be able to see where you can adjust before things fall flat and you continue with improvement rather than doubling down on your mistakes, you are likely to have results. Does it mean you won't step on some toes? You will step on toes. If you're to get electricity in Africa today, you're going to have to step on the toes of generator marketers and distributors. There's no way you're going to do that. Every time you initiate something, it's likely to take advantage of some people and give advantage to maybe many more. You've just got to be ready to deal with those. As I said, even though I'm not sure about the sincerity or purpose, but if you tackle corruption, corruption will fight back, yes, but you've got to also anticipate those things so that you are not surprised. You do your scenario planning, you look at your worst case scenario, you always have like 3 scenarios in things. When COVID hit, we sat down in my office, we sat down at home and said, what is the best case scenario? Optimistically, we'll be back to normal in 1 month. No way. 3 months minimum. My family was split across 2 locations. I was on one side, the rest of them were elsewhere. I was prepared for the 3 months. Those of them who were even together and had company were the ones that after 3 months, they were itching to get back. Well, because I had made my mind. So that's what leaders also do. And they're ready for those kind of things. And these are the kind of ingredients that make it possible for you to decide on how people go along with you. If you don't have buy-in, if you're on your own or you think you know too much, that thing is going to fall flat and it might be at an expensive cost.
Thank you very much, PT. There's a question from Wura. She says, how do we begin to overcome the sense of being victimized, especially when a leader is trying to build trust? Our people are quick to cry wolf, claiming victimization and marginalization.
If you don't mind repeating that, I had a comment.
I'm putting it on the chat box now.
Okay.
How do we begin to overcome the sense of being victimized, especially when a leader is trying to build trust? Our people are quick to cry wolf, claiming victimization or marginalization.
Oh, excellent. And it goes back to trust. If I don't trust you, I'm likely to suspect your motive, even if they are pure. And so building trust is a two-way thing. We can't put all the onus on the leader. We also have to be able to have trust in that leader. And you can say the leader has to win my trust. But how about you winning the leader's trust as well, to be able to share things with you and be comfortable that you will give them authentic feedback? And I think some of it will happen if we ask clarifying questions with an open mind. Instead of asking questions that rub people off or that you're accusing them, you really ask questions with the mind of listening and wanting to really gain insights. And if they have been truthful and they do walk the talk of what they say, then that builds trust. I'll give you an example. I used to work in the oil and gas sector, and my nickname is Senior Militant because all those militants out there, we know ourselves. But when I was negotiating with the communities, I found out that if I approach things in the Western way in which I was trained, Harvard-trained negotiator and all that kind of crap, you go in trying to negotiate in the Western world, and I found out the hard way once or twice. Things didn't go well because it wasn't always rational. I was trying to use a rational, logical approach to negotiation, while these guys were more emotional about where they were coming from. It was also about not wanting to lose face. Face was a big factor for them. You're already the big, bad oil and gas company. It's like Goliath against David, but in their own case, Goliath was winning. And so David wanted to cut him to size. I had to understand that I needed to approach things from their perspective. And so we said, okay, how do you want us to approach this issue? How do you want us to cut this deal? And they came up and said, this way, that way, that way. And the first time, I didn't. And they said, we always have to meet before the main meeting. And I was ready, all planned up on my side and just go to the meeting. I found out that if you didn't meet before the meeting and understand their drivers, their nuances, and sometimes make sure you are looking at their interests without doing anything unethical, if not, they would deadlock the meeting because they were threatened by certain things. And some of them will say, you can't reveal all of this to our people. Not necessarily, but if you go this way, you erode us as leaders. This is our leverage. The first one or two that I didn't trust them enough, but I had to take a risk. And all the dress rehearsal they did with me, when they went out there, the meeting looked like it was going to go bad against me, that they were going to double cross me. But just about the 11th hour, they switched everything back like this, like a movie director, and things fell into place. We had the agreement, we got the work done. That built trust in me. And then in debriefing, I asked them, so what was all that? He said, if you go in and it's too easy, our people will suspect.
Wow.
If you do this and do that, they'll suspect and they will deadlock things, everything will go awry. I was like, really? Cultural diversity 101. And so once we've done one or two like that, we understood how to approach things. I always knew I had to have caucus. And then that's when I was reminded that even in my Western negotiation training, there's a room for caucus. Caucus is when you have sidebars and you know everybody's interest and you anchor various ones, especially if you're doing multi-party negotiations. You've got to bring them all together before you now go forward and mark things. And the newest example will be what happened at COP27. When the conference ended and they couldn't go away because multiple parties had interests, developing nations, oil companies, Western nations that wanted an end to petrol, oil and gas and everything overnight. Financial institutions that were going to blackmail of developing nations that they will no longer finance their oil and gas projects beyond a particular year. People had to move all of those interests together to find a communique that will suit everybody somehow, but not please anybody too much. And so those were some of the learnings. So as a follower, I've got to ask my leader questions. And if he or she delivers, then my trust barometer goes higher. My trust meter goes up with them. And if the leader also knows that I can trust you, put in your shift, you have my back, then their own trust meter rises with you. And then that's how incrementally you keep growing. We can't run without even learning to crawl first. You got to invest time. Too often we're in a hurry to look like the US or Canada or Singapore, who didn't get there overnight and who had to also progress and go through the same process. That's part of what we've got to cut ourselves some slack to learn and give ourselves time. Of course, we can shorten the learning curve because we are learning from their own experiences, but still, there's only so much you can fast track certain things.
Thank you very much, PT. You raised a critical point in there that I want to take you up on, and I want to expatiate a little bit, that followers must be able to ask questions. Now, how do you deal? I mean, Fisaya was here, and there's saying that Fisaya and I shares very well that a lot of people say they're leaders. They love the crowd. They don't love the people. I've always believed, I'm from the school of thought that if you really love the people, then your esteem will not be built on how many people follow you. You will give them enough to set them free. So when I'm running seminars, for example, some of my colleagues will say to me, Praise, you give too much, you give too much. And I say, if they are paid for a task, let's give them all they need so that they don't need me anymore. But they would say to me, you need to make money like 4 times from them. So give them a little so that they can come back and you see all these things. Now, and so such leaders, nobody can question them. How do followers manage a leader that has low self-esteem, nobody can question, and that you know is set up to profit from you and not necessarily to improve you, especially in Africa?
Thank you. It's not only Africa. I mean, there are some universal qualities we all have. It's systems that put checks and balances in all of us. The same us that behave where there's accountability, we misbehave when we get here because we think we can get away with it. But good question. I said something earlier on, and that's about the fact that it's got to start by being transactional. You have the first dealing with the leader. The leader proves themselves trustworthy. They deliver. So they build trust in you. If they fail, you're not going to trust them. They'll have to work twice as hard to win your trust back. But if they deliver the first time, and they're okay, you cut them some slack. They do a second one, and if they have a track record, then they grow their credibility with you. But it's got to initially start transactionally before they can carry people along. And if the leader is not trustworthy and they betray the trust, they don't deliver, then the followers are going to cut them loose. And it's going to be such that the leader finds himself alone, and then maybe that's when they resort to repressive tactics. But there's only so much you can get away with those repressive tactics. There are leaders that their followership is based on transactions. Remove the largesse, and they don't have followers again. But there are those who, they may start transactionally, but then because they built that currency of trust, people will follow them without even asking for those things. And I use transaction not only financially, because every interaction is a transaction of some sort. Today we are transacting somewhat. Mm-hmm. If I gel with you guys, you may be inviting me back. If I don't gel with you, it's a one-off. The people in the house of saviors have stuck with you because they bought into what this is all about. If they don't buy in, they'll drop off and your count will begin to reduce. So it's got to grow gradually. But the system will deal with a leader as long as the leader is not, if they are repressive, they can only do so for so long. But as long as we are objective and we're not following blindly, we're not following because of some primordial considerations, there's no way that we will sustain bad leadership for too long. Nobody wants something that is unpleasant. It's only when we've normalized deviance, bad things, or we never saw the standards. And I often say, I pity some of the young ones who never saw a fountain at Tinubu Square, who never saw buses run to time in the streets of Lagos. All they've seen is everything that's gone bad. They don't know that we had it better and that we can bring it back again. So sometimes when you're talking about those ideals, they're looking at you like, what do we know? This is the only kind of leadership we've ever known, until their visions and their scopes and focus are expanded for them to see that there are alternatives to this.
Wow. Thank you very much, PT. So I'll take two more questions and I would allow you go because I know your time is very precious, PT. Now,
no worries. I'm enjoying this myself.
Inclusion and diversity has become a buzzword, right? I mean, people use it all the time. I mean, I know you are an expert in that area, right? And, you know, I want you to expatiate a little bit or explain it a little bit. And, you know, how can, I mean, many of the people on this call are emerging African leaders. Some of them are in the UK, US, Canada. We have people, you know, some of them are in the Middle East. How can emerging African leaders lead in such a complex setting? I mean, I know you are a Christian, you are even a pastor, but I've seen you lead all kinds of, there was a video that was posted in the group about, you know, somebody, maybe a transgender, and people beat him. And you were the one who came up to say, why do we always try to attack people who don't look like us and things like that? You know, how should we prepare? What should we know about diversity and inclusion? And how can we lead in such a complex setup?
Thank you, Chris. I first got involved in diversity and inclusion efforts in that at an organizational level, I think around 2000. Then 2000 or 2001, I'm not too sure now. Chevron set up diversity councils because issues of diversity had arisen in Nigeria. And Nigeria is faced with a lot of diversity, just as Africa is in most parts of the world. But in the workplace in Nigeria, because of unionism, you've got issues of unionism versus management. You've got ethnicity, you've got diversity of religion, you've got age, gender issues in the workplace. So I got involved. And then things became more complex and they needed, so that was in a volunteer role as a member of a council. Then they needed to now have a dedicated office. And so I pioneered that. And that was how Chevron led the way in corporate Nigeria and being the first to really elevate diversity and inclusion. And then I was fortunate to now go to the Chevron headquarters to further take 2 more positions and lead a lot of the efforts out there. So it's more than a buzzword. It's something that the corporate world globally has been looking at for over 2 decades in very serious terms. I mean, my first role was in 2003, and I held 3 roles there before I moved on to other things in 2009. So I think I spent about 6 years in that field. One way to define diversity, and I think it's Vanna Myers that put it this way, say it's being asked to the party, it's being invited to the party. But inclusion is being asked to dance. You know, they can invite you to the party and you're just floating there. You're not doing anything. You're just in one corner. Okay, take food, take drink. And yet everybody is dancing. Nobody wants to dance with you. But inclusion is being asked to dance. Another saying about it, way to look at it is, people often look at diversity from the visible aspect alone. Race, ethnicity, gender, tribe, religion. If your religious outfit identifies you like the Sikhs or the Muslims, not every Muslim, of course. Some you can't tell, or the skull cap for the Jew. And so diversity is visible for most people, but it's also diversity of thinking, of thought. There's diversity of your decision-making style. There's diversity of communication. There's diversity of several other things. So diversity is what you get when people walk through the door. But inclusion is what you do with what you get. Inclusion is making, diversity can be about counting heads. And many organizations are still at the lowest level. They're just saying, oh, we have 4 women on the leadership team out of 10, this and that. That's the lowest level. That's just counting the heads. Inclusion is really about making the heads count. So it's not enough to know about how many Muslims are in a nation or how the ethnic groups are split or young generation versus that. Inclusion really is about designing and running things mindful of what you get and tapping into all those collective strengths. And inclusion will be the degree to which organizations or countries embrace all of their constituent parts in an organization, maybe all the employees, and you enable them to make meaningful contributions to in the workplace. If you bring me in, and some companies still hire Black people, but they don't promote them, they don't give them meaningful work. If you bring me in, you're just greenwashing things, and I'm not going to be happy. I'm even going to probably feel more insulted, more frustrated for not allowing myself to have the opportunities I see others have. And so that's not what it's about. What we then want to do, as I said earlier on, is to acknowledge, recognize, and take advantage of those differences and not be threatened by them. How do you, as an organization, and Chevron did this very well as a global organization. Sorry, I seem to be doing free adverts for them, but they trained me well over the years looking at that. But the truth is, when you're a global organization, you need to understand that if you're leaving California, your headquarters, and you want to go and do business in Nigeria, you've got to have some cultural intelligence. Your cultural intelligence must be high. How do they conduct business there? Can we do that true to our values, or should we walk away from that deal and go somewhere else? If we're going to do these things, and companies do a lot of their market intelligence, and part of it also involves some of this, how are we going to run our own, power our own equipment and things, and what do we need to do? How do we tap into the workforce? If we're going into Africa, where should we go? Oh, Nigeria is the one with the strongest workforce, and they speak English. That gives them an advantage over Angola, because Angola, things will be lost in translation between Portuguese and English. And so part of what companies look at, when we're going to China, we could have the best proposal. But if you don't have a sponsor, somebody that the decision maker recognizes and respects, if somebody just comes from nowhere and says, I want to do this, but it's a different thing, you may have the best proposal, but if Praise Forward introduces them, and even if the proposal that the person Praise Forward introduces is at 70% and the other one is at 90%, I'm likely to do business with that 70% than the 90% because that one has no sponsor. I don't know them from Adam. So I should not expect to conduct business the way I do. Look at what's happening now with Qatar. People say we want to go in there and we want to wear LGBT bands and we want to do all sorts. And the Qataris say, heck, no. When you come into my home, you live by my rules. And all that conversation is going on. And the people know that if I don't want to get in trouble in Qatar, I better watch World Cup on TV. If I'm going to go there, I better be ready to comply. Because it's only for a month. After a month, I can go express my views. And even the footballers that wanted to get it for political, they were warned. And those ones say, hey, guys, whoever is sponsoring us, we don't want to mess up our careers. I think we'll park this one. We'll resume after. So very true. Understand the rules of engagement. Understand what everybody brings to the table. And business cases will differ from place to place. The business case in the US in terms of diversity and inclusion and equity are majorly around race and gender. And in recent times, sexual orientation. In Nigeria, it's religion and ethnicity. Everything is looked at through the lenses of religion and ethnicity in Nigeria above everything else. And there's no need to say somebody is backward for doing those. You need to acknowledge that those are filters through which you look things, but then what you want to do is make sure you are not always prejudiced when you look through those. So you've got to engage and make sure each time you have information and your decision quality is correct when you are responding, so that you are not prejudging and you're not seeking confirmation bias around everything. But what you get is one thing, what you do with it is another thing, as I said. And Africa is very diverse, extremely diverse, traditionally. Then what we said earlier on the colonial top-up, then the neo-colonial and global pressures are adding to that. So leadership has become more complex because you've got to lead at all those levels. And yet it's easier to be open than to be closed. It's easier to open a door for others to come in than to close that door. Because if you close the door at them, you have got to deploy all your energy to keep that door closed. Otherwise, they're going to knock. And when they're not answering them, they won't be nice, they will break the door down. That's why we have the fault lines and the issues that we have, because you have the ins and the outs. For as long as you keep people out, even if they're the minority, you're not going to be able to rest fully. And this is why it is. But research has shown that companies that value diversity, they outperform those who don't. Companies that value diversity and inclusion and tap into it, they outperform. Because employees, prospective employees, look at how diverse an organization is, how inclusive it is before they will accept to work with them. And that may be more so in the Western world than here, because we don't have enough jobs, people will rush in and say, but if people have choices, they research. and they ask questions. They can look and say, all of you are Swahilis. I don't see a KwaZulu person like me here. I don't see a Yoruba person like me here. I don't see a woman, or I don't see somebody of my generation here. You're all old school. So people have a choice. And if you tap in and you're trying to enter certain markets and you don't have the perspectives, it's like a bunch of geriatrics trying to market young millennials. How are you going to do it? How are you going to understand? How are you going to embrace that? You've got to have those things. If you don't do well, you miss the markets. That's why you see adverts, product adverts in this part of the world at football stars that look more, that are indigenous, than to continue using the ones from out there, except when they're thinking about global appeal. So it's about aligning internally first. In Africa, once we can align and ensure we have a level playing field for ourselves, then it becomes easier for us to stand strong and then take on the external parties that we want to relate with. I hope that answers that.
Absolutely, PT. I'll take one more question before my final question, because you shared something. Now, Nigeria is very, very religious, right? So I won't allow you go without asking that question. We're very religious every day, prayer meeting every morning. Across board. It's almost like there is a command to say, bombard us every morning with prayer meeting. And, and there's nothing wrong with prayer, because I know you pray a lot. I've experienced Christianity in other parts of the world. I've experienced Christianity in the UK, for example, the Anglican Communion there, and, Soul Save Survivors Church, which I attended a bit of at Watford. I've experienced Islam in other parts of the world as well. And I've seen Islam, lead to development in UAE, and even in Saudi Arabia. I look at northern Nigeria and the brand of Islam there. I look at the brand of Christianity in the southwestern Nigeria, and I'm asking, how would Nigeria develop when this is what we do? That the basic parameters that grow a nation, we don't pay attention to them as much as we pay attention to what we can't control. What is your take on this briefly, PT? Can a nation grow with our disposition towards religion and how we carry out our religious practices? Or would you say that our religion is cultural as well? PT.
Religion is a core part of people. But people have to know religion is a core part of us. And we have to know. I'm sorry. I think it's the issue with multiple devices. Let me take one. I'm sorry about that. All right. Does that sound better?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. Religion is an integral part of people, and you can tell how many wars have been fought on the basis of religion. So I think we should allow people practice their faith, but then define boundaries about how you want to operate things in the public space. A lot of people are defined by their religion, and their outlooks are shaped by their religion. However, we must define where and how we want that to play in the public space. We must not, on the basis of religion, neglect things that need to be done to improve situations. Now, and then also we've got to define how we want to say, how we define development. There are people who live in rustic environments, and it's also ironic that in the Western world, despite all the development, when people are tired and they want to take a break, they actually go into places where they unplug from all of the vestiges of civilization. Why writers go into the woods to write and all that. But everybody's got to define what development means for them. But also keep boundaries between religion, especially when you are in a pluralistic society. If you are homogeneous in terms of your faith, you can do certain things. But once you have diversity of religion, you've got to make sure that, just as we've said about everything else, there is inclusiveness, but don't let that be what defines the running of the business of government and the public administration. But we must not beat up religion as if it doesn't have its space. Faith keeps a lot of people going on. And for me, faith and science are not in conflict. We just got to know where each one must play its role and not be a hindrance to the other.
Thank you very much, PT. Final question from me, then I think Wura has a question. You have led in multinationals over the years, and I wanted to share with us what do you think are your top 5 secrets, that has helped you, effectively lead and grow. 5 tips that we can hold on to. Then Wura is asking, please pardon my seeming ignorance. I get why diversity around race, gender, and religion matters. You can tell where a person falls. But when it comes to sexual orientation, how and why is that a matter of inclusion? Because this isn't an obvious leaning for an individual. So that's Wura. So you might want to take that, PT, before you take my final question, sir.
Okay, Wura, that is a very deep question and one that's been debated a great deal. There are those who believe, and they have pointed the fact that right from when they were young, they had certain leanings, and it was not by choice. And so they believe that's the way they were made. There are those who say, no, it's a matter of a choice between being heterosexual and homosexual. But the truth is, regardless of whether people choose one thing or the other, they ought not to be persecuted for that. They ought not to be ostracized for that. They ought not to be attacked and killed and lynched for that. There are many things that we do that are abhorrent, but people don't really come after us, lynching us and beating us up. So that's why the majority often has the onus of protecting even the minority, and not just say that the minority, it doesn't matter. You may debate whether it should be on the same level as these ones, but as I said, it's got to be what is the business case in each location. But in many parts of the Western world, and because of the active advocacy done by the LGBTQ+I movement, they have been able to position this as a human rights issue, and they do have a lot of support in that regard. Praise, I don't know about secrets, your question about 5, but maybe I like the word tips.
Tips, okay.
5
tips.
5 things that I have found that have worked for me. Number 1, integrity. You've got to do what you say. And when you have a track record with people in that regard, then they can go the extra mile for you. I have been saved a lot of trouble by those who believed in me, who found me a person of integrity, that even when there were bad things being planned, they could vouch for me and say, heck no, it can't be him. I mean, I faced panels and things where integrity was put in question, but you came out clean in that regard. And integrity is not only about financial things, but just keeping your promises and delivering on what you say you will do, whether it's your work, whether it's showing up at 1 o'clock as agreed and things like that. So integrity is a big one for me. The other one for me is building social capital. I was telling somebody the other day that there is nothing that I want to do in any part of the world that I will not know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. Before you've gone 5 steps, 5 persons away, as some say, you'll be able to know somebody who will be able to introduce you or open a resource to connect you to be able to do that stuff. And that's because one has chosen not to be a recluse, and one has chosen to network, not because of what one wants to get out of it, but because you maintain and nurture those relationships, especially giving more off. And then the day you want to cash in on your goodwill bank, you find ready hands who are willing to support you. The third one for me will be about delivering results. If you're going to grow in your profession, in anything, you've got to be a performer. You've got to deliver what you were given or assigned to do. And if you can go above and deliver beyond the targets, you even have more credibility with people. So people love a performer. I reward performers on the job myself. And so delivering results is one that I believe has helped me, and I've seen helped other people around me in their career. The fourth one is that I flip the more, that saying that if it's not broken, don't fix it. Not with me. I break things that aren't broken. I fix things that aren't broken. I'm always looking to raise the bar to see how we can do something better. It was worse when I was younger because I never seemed to take the time to smell the coffee. I know better now to rest and celebrate milestones, but I'm always looking for process improvement and how to optimize things. How can you make this better? If we could deliver this with 14, how can we deliver it with maybe 12 next time until you realize that, okay, you can't deliver with 12 without compromising quality, then we'll say this is the optimal. But that's the way I'm always looking at things. I try to run the organization as if I'm running it with my personal funds, but I even find out that that's not good enough, because with my personal funds, I may be a bit more generous than even other, but you have to make sure that there is value for money, there is efficiency. How many is that? Is that 4?
4, okay. That's 4.
So you asked for 5. The 5th one is to keep growing. If you stop growing, you are beginning to die. So keep growing. I love to travel. And when I travel, I don't go the popular tourist routes. I like to see the back streets, learn things about where I want to, whether it's in Oluji or Illinois, regardless where it is. I want to be able to learn. I want to pick something away from there. And I read all kinds of topics. Now, I don't have capacity to be reading big voluminous books, so I subscribe to newsletters where somebody summarized the nugget. I know a little bit about it. If I now need to drill deeper, it's a different thing, but you know enough to be informed. Current affairs, groups that I join help me, that even if I don't have time to start reading, the fact that the guys are commenting about them, and you and I belong to one where almost every topic under the sun gets discussed, and when you go to sleep, people are awake on the other climb. I'm in Nigeria, you're in North America, so I wake up sometimes and I see God knows over 100 messages. I wonder, were they sharing money while I was asleep? Then I guess it's something that's broken up in another part of the world while I was asleep. So to keep growing, to keep being curious, never think you know it. Otherwise, you're going to get stale. You'll be like the IBM typewriter that will get consigned into dustbin when the computer came and things like just, the bar is just continually being raised. So I think those are the five tips that I can give right now at the spur of the moment. Yes, those are the ones that come to mind.
Thank you very much, PT, for sharing with us and sharing your time with us. House of Saviors, can we say thank you to PT? PT, thank you very much. You know, I must say something. PT and I are in a group, right? And so every time people ask me about that group, I say to people that that is about the only group where I feel unintelligent, you know, because of the caliber of people in that group. I mean, all of them are my bonds, you know, they are so vast. And when they are sharing, I'm taking notes, because I'm like, if I'm in other groups, I'm like a genius. But in that group, I feel very unintelligent. So I'm taking notes.
We all learn from each other. Everybody brings something as an SME to the table. I learn a lot from you and from even those who are younger than you. They say it's just a matter of expertise, not even a matter of age or anything.
Thank you very much, PT. We are really grateful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We will surely bring you back again next time, PT, but I'll give you a longer notice so that we can take that masterclass that you talk about, because I think we all need it. And I think that the more people we have who subscribe to this worldview and who grow, then they can also replicate it wherever they are. And that's one of the ways I think we can develop our continent. Thank you very much, PT. Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And the more that we are having what we call the Jackpot syndrome as people emigrate, the more people are, their intelligence around diversity and inclusion rises, the better their chances of success when they get into the workplaces and the societies out there. So I'll be glad to come and deep dive sometime in future. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, PT.